morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. Good morning, Christos.
Good morning or good afternoon or wherever you are. I can't say it as well as you say it.
Well,
So
you
there you
well,
have
you
it.
know where I am. Um,
I know where you are. It's midday for you already,
well,
right? For me, it's just 7
I
a.m.
mean, I don't know if I'd call it midday, but it's not it's not particularly early. But
Okay.
I mean, whatever. It is what it is, right?
It is what it is. Oh man, I love our new graphics. I don't know what other people feel, but we done a pretty good job in creating those graphics out there.
Well,
Let's know
that's the thing. We never actually talked about why we're called the 425 show. I just realized. So you may have noticed the new branding. I think it looks pretty good. In fact, I think it looks really good. But we sat around and we just were trying to figure out what we wanted to call the show because in a normal Microsoft way of, you know, the Microsoft Identity Developer Advocacy Show, uh, just
It's a mouthful.
it's a mouthful. It's not super exciting. I mean, it's extremely clear, I guess.
Very crisp, as you like to say. Or is that the term that you hate? You were saying that yesterday. Like, I hate
Well, I
that.
had a guy who used to always tell me, he's like, we need to be crisp here. And I was like, I don't know. Speaking of crisp, my mom got a new cat. And she was
Okay.
sending pictures. She sent pictures of the cat to all of us, to my siblings and myself. And at the same time, my brother was talking about toaster strudels. So when I
Oh,
looked at the text, I thought that she had named the cat Toaster Strudel, which
okay.
would be an interesting name for a cat. But anyway, so we sat around and we tried to figure out a name, and of course
Did she go with crisp?
no, but the 425 is of course the area code for Redmond, right?
Correct.
Which of course is
Yes.
at least it's where you are. I am 3,000 miles away on the other side of the country, but it's where most of the people that we work with are.
Hmm.
But then it turns out there was a second meaning to 425, right? There's
There
an
is.
HTTP status code. And what does that status code mean, Christos?
It means too early. Very aptly named.
Yeah, it's perfect.
So for the HTTP error or code aficionados out there, that's just like normal
So
stuff. We are way too
what
early.
time is it for you, Christos?
Well, it is 7 o'clock right now, but I had to get up at 6, because this is not easy. It takes some effort. It doesn't just simply happen. Right? No, I got up at 6, checked some emails, did some social media posting, and my due diligence, grabbed my coffee, put some fresh clothes on.
Yeah.
See, today I'm going with pink. I think I'm going to establish a pink stream day, right? I'll be wearing
Yeah.
pink
Well,
because I got a ton of pink shirts and I need to wear
as long
pink.
as you don't blend into the background.
That's a good point. I did not realize when this, but yesterday I had this kind of a gray khaki color, and oh my God, I looked like a black and white movie. I don't know if it was the background or my green screen or whatever, but it looked awful. So today I said I might add some color. Now, in my mind, I did not think that it was going to be blending with our background because I forgot our new background. So maybe I need to establish a new color. Maybe I don't know.
That's okay.
Uh,
I wore green.
well, we have red shirt for Guthrie and we have black shirt for Donovan. I need to come up with my own. Maybe pink shirt. I don't
Pink
know.
shirt
We'll
for.
establish that.
Well, I mean, what color? Well, I guess being identity, we cover everything, so it needs to probably be rainbow.
There
That way,
you
you get the
go.
orange from Office, the blue from Azure,
Yes.
the
Yes.
I don't know.
Let's see how good you are with the rainbow colors now because you should know the song. Your kids are in school.
No, what song?
There's a song for the rainbow colors. I'm not going to sing it live. Don't try to trap me into doing
I mean,
that.
I seem to remember something when I was a kid, like reading Rainbow or something. But well, just yeah,
Maybe it's only you
you'll
kids.
end up with one green stripe in the middle that you can see through because of the
Yes.
green screen,
Yeah.
which might actually be kind of interesting. So
Don't wear green in front of a green screen when you go out on the street.
yeah. So okay. So what are we doing today? I think we got a pretty packed couple of hours here, don't we?
We do have a pretty packed couple of hours. First of all, we have an exciting announcement. It's super exciting. Lots of people have been waiting for this. So I'm not going to steal your thunder. I'm going to let you introduce the subject. But then at 8 a.m. or 11 a.m. Pacific time or 3 p.m. UTC time, dude, I'm telling you, I'm getting this kind of operating across multiple time zones to the dot. Uh, so we're at 8 a.m. my time. We're joined by the docs team, which is way too early for them as well. We had to negotiate the time, but they are joining us to show us how millions of people are using our docs and how thousands of developers are contributing every day, and to show us how the sausage is made when it comes to deciding and prioritizing documentation. And they're open for feedback. So please make sure you stick around to let us know how you feel about our
All
docs.
right, cool.
Oh,
Yeah, that'll be awesome.
yeah.
I'm excited they're coming because, especially because the Azure AD docs in particular have gotten significantly better the past few years. I think it'll be cool that they're coming on.
Sometimes we're a little bit too strict with our own stuff. Like I go and like I checked other products over the years, and I had to work with other APIs. And oh my God, some documentation is appalling. And I wouldn't say ours is perfect, but ours has come a very long way
Yeah.
uh, to be what it is. So kudos to the team, and I want to hear what they have to say. But it's if you are working with our technologies, and I hope that you appreciate the amount of effort that goes into the docs. But before we jump into the super cool stuff, we also have one more announcement that at 9 a.m., right, we're jumping to another call straight after the stream to do the global monthly identity developer call, right? The community call
Yep.
there. And there we're going to be covering about the identity.web, Microsoft Identity.web, the new library, the new authentication library that comes into .NET Core that has simplified and made things so much easier. So we have demos, we got a couple of slides. So if you want to jump on that, maybe we can share the link
Yep.
so people can still register and join us. You can come and find out all about it. We've already streamed about Identity.web quite a few times. But
Yeah. I mean,
there's new goodness coming in.
if you've been watching
Yeah.
the show regularly, then identity.web it's almost old hat at this point, but there's still a lot of changes, a lot of folks who haven't seen it yet. So
Dude, I can never get bored playing with Identity.web. I'll tell you that. It's made my life so much easier, and hopefully it makes everybody else's life so much easier.
well, there's all sorts of new stuff too, like like abstracting away, getting tokens for services like Graph and even your own services and things like that is super cool. So
Yeah, and the latest iteration has added some super awesome goodness
yeah,
there. So join us. And by the way, can I do a shameful plug to my mobile developer talk later today?
well, sure. I mean, it's not really a plug if it's your own thing, right?
Well, it's our thing. It's our thing. We also do meetups, people. So if you want us to come and join one of your meetups or local user groups or conferences, let us know. But today I am invited to speak to the New York mobile user group at 3 p.m.
Nice.
3 p.m. 6 p.m. their time. So that means that I will be talking about identity in the mobile space and how you can use AD and BTC to authenticate users in your mobile apps.
Nice.
So there you have it. I'll share the link later.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we had a couple.
Be-
I think we had a couple questions come in over the past week. You had one, yeah?
I did have one, yeah. We have talking about mobile apps and B2C. We had a customer that reached out to us. We'll respond to them separately, but I think that's something that other people may come across. They're struggling to find a way to update custom user properties that they collect during user registration, and they're having an issue on how to update them via their mobile app.
Ah,
So the user logs in, they might collect CT and date of birth and other information, and then they want to allow users to go into the mobile app and edit those properties. So is that something that people can do?
sure. Yep. It's what's called a user profile edit flow in B2C.
Right?
So, in fact, I'll pull one up here so we can take a look. And what that flow gives us is essentially a mechanism for updating properties on a user.
Mm-hmm.
the other side to that is whether or not you're using a custom policy or not. So custom policies in B2C you can sort of do anything with, and if you're using a custom policy, there are some starter policies out there, starter files, starter flows, whatever you want to call them, to get that going. But if you're not, you can use the out-of-the-box profile edit flows for editing user properties.
And remember to zoom in for old eyes. At least me. I'm too old.
So in our set of user flows for one of these, we've got there's one now called profile editing.
Yep.
And of course it's been there for a long time, but so it's we'll give it a name like profile edit. We'll choose our things here. I'll just choose all of them because why not? The other one, I think my Sunlight policy has all of them anyway. You'll notice there are new questions here for 3 and 4 that we've got.
Yes, it's amazing, right?
There's MFA methods, MFA enforcement, conditional are always on, which is kind of neat. All because of conditional access policies that were recently added to B2C.
Yes.
And then we have the user attributes, right? So these are the things that we want to do. And so you'll notice we have things like some custom property. So this is a custom property that I created in the portal somewhere, right? So if you're just doing
custom or extended, same name.
So if you're doing portal flows where you're just working inside the B2C portal and you're not doing anything else, you're not doing anything with custom policies or anything, you can do a profile edit flow, and the profile edit flow is what will handle capturing these extra properties or giving people a chance to edit them, like if I want to change my display name, for example.
Right.
If you're doing custom policies, it's essentially the same thing. You still express them in kind of the same way. Only you're doing it in custom policy instead of doing it in the portal. But I'll pull this one up here just so we can go take a look at it and get signed in.
I like how you chose all the social media accounts, but at the same time,
don't use one.
You did not use them.
So here's my some custom property, right? And I also chose display name. If we go back and look at the user attributes, we checked display name, which is what makes that show up here. So I could change this to be, my actual Gmail account, or whatever. We could change that.
I'm surprised that they don't have labels next to the text boxes. It's a little bit weird, isn't it?
Well, they use placeholder text.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't see that.
And then,
I need more coffee. There you go. Coffee.
And then we could call this, custom property value, whatever.
Very nice.
Hit continue. And now we get sent over to our app. And you'll notice extension some custom property now has my value on it, custom property value.
Easy peasy lemon squeezy.
Yep. And if you need this property for login or for other flows, it could always be included in those other flows. So if we have a sign up and sign in flow, for example, I'll use one of the new ones. Under application claims, we've got some custom property here. We can check that, and now it'll be included in the claims. So
very nice.
Yeah, so that's pretty straightforward. It's just you in your application. Typically you use a sign in flow, sign in or sign up flow to sign a user in, like this one. But if you've got if you need to do profile editing. Typically, you would, a user signs into your app and they're in your view or whatever, and maybe you've got a, edit profile button and they click that, and you sort of treat it just like another login. You send them back to B2C along with this specific policy in the URL, your profile editing policy, and because the user had already signed in, they won't need to sign into B2C again per se, but
nice.
They will be sort of silently signed into B2C and then presented with the profile edit screen. So Yeah.
Ooh.
So that one's pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, of course, feel
Yep.
free to let us know. So I got a B2C one today or yesterday on calling the graph, but it was
Calling the graph with
well, it
BTC.
was all within
Hmm.
custom policy. So
Okay.
essentially, though, the flow is the same. Custom policies have things called REST actions, which is essentially an API call that B2C itself will make while a user is signing in. Really useful for migration, really useful when you've got an existing legacy system that you're migrating from, or even one that you have to have forever. Really useful when you have like maybe an HR system or some sort of external system that has user data in it, and you want that user data to be in the claims that come through B2C. Especially when that HR data is valid across the entirety of your app suite, and you want it to come through B2C, and you don't want to write logic into every single one of your apps to go ping your HR database or something, right? So in there, your your custom policies have this sort of concept of a user journey, and a user journey is all the steps that a user goes through. So one of them might be to collect the user's information, create their account in Azure AD, sort of in the back end, maybe present them with some extra fields or something. And one of the steps in that user journey would be call a service. So in this case specifically, the customer's trying to trying to set group membership for a user in B2C, which is sort of a touchy thing anyway, because groups aren't really sort of formally in B2C. Groups work by nature, by virtue of the fact that B2C is built on top of Azure AD. So a user can technically be put into a group, but you don't. They don't work in the same way you would expect if you're familiar with Azure AD. But because they're getting that group data out of B2C in a custom policy during sign-in, it's kind of okay because they're handling the bulk of the heavy lifting themselves. So what they want to do is add a user to a group during sign-up. And while you can't really call the graph directly from B2C, instead, you can make a REST API call and call out to a REST API of your own building, something that you've built on your own. And then that REST API is what handles actually talking to the graph behind your B2C tenant or behind your B2C directory and saying, hey, put this user in group ABC. The two key considerations are that your REST API needs to be secured, because B2C is going to be calling it, but it needs to be on the internet. You don't want anybody else calling it. So because of that, it needs to be secured. We would prefer certificate authentication. So there's no like OAuth or anything for calling that. It's just straight up certificate authentication for calling that API. And then the API itself will need client credentials to go talk to the graph. And of course, you want to protect those pretty well too. If you're using something like Azure Functions, you've got things like Key Vault available to you to make that relatively straightforward.
Key Vault, my favorite service.
The other thing to keep in
Maybe just behind App Insights. So close.
yeah, App Insights is probably one of my favorites, but the other sort of big consideration when using REST APIs in B2C is that B2C is a global service, right? So we deploy that we run the service around the world.
Yep.
If a critical path of your sign-in flow or profile edit flow or whatever, if a critical path is your own REST API, then it's a good idea to make sure that that REST API is as available as possible. So following good cloud patterns, maybe distributing it and putting it behind something like an Azure Front Door or using something like Traffic Manager to balance traffic. Because while our service may be up for, we may have really great uptime and it's not something you need to worry about in terms of our service. If your service is a critical path to a sign-in, then you need to make sure that it's ready to go. So just something to keep in mind is when you're using REST APIs, because they're really useful with B2C for adding functionality, for doing things that are either too difficult to express in the markup language or just not possible. Make sure that API, that you really spend some time thinking about the availability of that API, how you're going to deploy it, where your users may be coming from, Obviously, if a lot of your users are, say, in the U.S., most of the B2C service calls are going to be coming from U.S. nodes, and so you want your service sort of distributed throughout the U.S. well. But if you're taking in global sign-ins, you need to make sure that you've got those things available as close to your users as possible. Even though your users won't hit those APIs directly, B2C will be. You still want to be at least on the same continent as the rest of your users. So.
At least at the same continent. Please bring your users' data close to your apps or close to your users, right? That's very important. Yep. Many people forget about that, and then it becomes a bit of a mess, or they reach out to support because their application is not performing as expected. We do give you the architecture best practices and the infrastructure to do that, so please make sure you follow these, because you don't want your users in Australia to be using a data center in Europe.
Yep.
And I've seen this many, many times.
Yep, and then of course the first thing that gets blamed is like, oh, this cloud really sucks, It's like, well,
I don't know. I think we make it a little bit confusing. Like if you create a resource group in a region and then you stick everything in there, you assume that everything is in that resource group, for example, is in the same region as the resource group, but it is not. That's not how it works anyway in Azure.
Yep.
So something to be aware of.
Yep. So, okay, cool.
Enough with this. I want to see the new goodness. Or do we have more questions?
So those are the only questions I got that we could talk about. So, do you have any more? Or are we?
I do not.
Okay. So yesterday, there's a big announcement made that app roles in Azure AD now had a user interface, right?
Right.
So we've talked a lot on the show about authentication, of how we get users signed in, and maybe how we call other services and that sort of thing, right?
And
how to expose API scopes for your APIs and all sorts of good stuff like that. What we haven't really talked about is user authorization within your apps, right? And that's so we've got API authorization. How do we make sure you've got the right scopes in your token? If you're an API developer, how do I make sure the tokens I'm receiving have the right scopes, and that way I can do the right operations? But we haven't really talked a whole lot about just user roles in general. Of like, well, I've got roles in my application. How do I enforce those? And so,
right.
Historically, I'm going to open up some code. So this is a super old app. It was intended to be super old. Because
by super old you mean .NET, right? It's not from 20 years ago. It's just not using .NET Core.
Well,
correct?
Yeah, it's using .NET Framework. In fact, this app has a history of starting as a Kerberos Windows authenticated app that talks to SQL as a service account. It's Kerberos service account.
Oh boy!
And then goes through a bunch of different steps of sort of modernization, right?
I would love to have seen the iteration using Git, right? So you have Git labels across, or Git tags across every iteration of major rewrite.
So we do.
So you start from.
So I actually do.
Oh, you do have that.
Yeah.
Nice.
So in fact, it's all public. So I'll put a link to this in the thing. But it's called AAD Modernization out on GitHub, and it starts with an integrated, Kerberos regular domain joined thing, and migrates all the way up through adding authentication, and then we get to groups, we get to role databases, all through all sorts of different things. Right?
Nice.
In fact, I'm glad I pulled this up, because here's something worth looking at. So,
yep.
There are two things. One is we see a lot of customers, especially customers with older code, who are looking at or who are using groups for authorization. So if I'm in an AD group or an Active Directory group, I'm using that group in my authorized tag, for example, right?
Yep.
Or I'm using it for user.isEnroll, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it was just the name of the group. So you'd have an authorized attribute on a controller or an action, and it would say, and that's what it would say, right? It would be the name of the group, which was fine.
Zoom in. There you go. Close the diagnostic tools. Why is that even open?
I think because it's still running, but so we would you'd end up in this place where you would use this authorized tag and you'd have group names listed here, right?
Yes.
So you'd migrate that app to Azure AD, and we'd say, oh yeah, you can get your groups in Azure AD. Totally include your groups in the claims. The problem was when you would include the groups in the claims, they would come over as GUIDs.
Yes.
So you still had to map an Azure AD group object ID to the name, which either meant a graph call to go and say, oh, what's the name of this group, or you had to come update your code to have different names in here. Of course, neither of those.
I was going to say the whole point is that you had to do more round trips and you had to write more code
Right.
in order to be able to work with groups, right?
Right. And so instead, the way that we would like to do it is there's sort of a distinction between a group and a role. So your application has roles, and users and groups could be members of those roles, right? So you sort of marry those two together. And so a group is sort of a universal concept. So if I'm in a group in Azure AD, I'm in a group. It has nothing to do with a specific app. It has nothing to do with a specific service. It's just I'm in a group. The group could be like our group, right? We're in a bunch of groups. So in Azure AD, there's sort of this concept of, well, let's take users, right? Let me get this open here. So let's take users and put those users in groups. And then let's have roles within applications, and those roles would be would have groups assigned into them. So if I go let's go find an app here. In fact, I'll just use the one we're going to use today. It's called Old SQL App, right? So in our app here, sorry, this isn't even the right place. See, I've gotten ahead of myself. In enterprise applications, we've got our Old SQL App, right? And here we have this concept of users and groups. And users and groups, this is where we add a user to a specific role, right? So I'll go find a user, I'll find myself. And, I'm not in this directory. It doesn't make any sense, but whatever. I'll find another user for me. I'll use this user, right? And so we can choose this user, and we could choose a role for them. So in this case, this app has two roles, administrative user and system user. Right? So we'll make this user an admin. We'll hit select, and we'll assign them. We can do the same with a group. So if we have a group of people, say AKS RBAC admins.
Hey.
So we've got this group. We can also assign that group to a specific role. So we'll put these users in system user or whatever, right? So we've assigned these users, and now these users, when they come and sign in, they'll have the whatever user or whatever groups they're or whatever roles they're in will come over as claims. And lo and behold, those role claims work directly with the roles here. So
should we also mention that another thing with groups is that there's a limit on how many you can stick into a token, right? So many people hit a group limit token.
Oh yeah, for sure. So if you're a member of hundreds and hundreds of groups, like we're all members of hundreds of groups,
well, we are.
Your token size will increase considerably, and at a certain threshold, we cut it off. So we'll either send you. So essentially, we send you a way to go get all the groups. So we'll send you some to start with, but we won't send them all because eventually your token size will be so big that it'll be a mess. And there's a side effect to that too, which is if you're sending somebody a 2K or 250K token, and they're on a 3G wireless connection somewhere, or even a 4G one for that matter, it's just going to add some latency, and it's just more things to process. So ideally, you don't include groups at all. And once we've moved to roles, and you're doing role assignment, then it doesn't matter. Then you don't need to get groups anymore. You don't need groups in your token.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And historically, if you wanted to do this, if we wanted to add a role to this app, we would come into the manifest, which is a big blob of JSON, right? And we would have to add app roles, which is kind of a pain, right? because you had to know what this JSON was. You had to know the specific format. You had to go to gwidgen.com or wherever and go generate GWIDs for them. And so this was it was a very specific activity. In fact, this GitHub repo talks about it specifically about, oh, well, yeah, you've got to go put this manifest in here in order to do the assignment, right?
Yep.
So, and it's not difficult. It's copying and pasting some JSON in, but it's everything to get to that point, right? Like, if we talk,
Yes.
I feel like we talk about this a lot, right? Is that the difficulty of any individual task in isolation is not really the question. It's easy to copy and paste this. What's hard is, well, how do I even know what this is? How do I even know that I need this? How do I even know where to find a proper one so that I can have all the fields that I need and what all these fields do, right?
Yes.
And so, yeah, you could do it, but it was one of those things that, if you knew, you knew. If you were in the circle, you knew about it, you did it, and it was fine, right?
Yeah.
So, luckily, one of the coolest things that came out yesterday or earlier this week was the ability to add roles through UI, through the portal itself. Right? So you notice we've got this app roles preview over here. In fact, I'll zoom in a little bit. Maybe not that much because then we get scroll bars, but so we've got our app roles preview. And so there are 3 roles currently. So these are 3 roles that I had added through the manifest, and they've been parsed and picked up in here, which is great. So we want to create a new one. Of course, I am not an admin right now because of PIM. So let's go elevate my access for long enough for me to do this.
PIM. What is PIM for people that don't know what PIM is?
So PIM is Privileged Identity Management in Azure AD, and it's a really cool way to give nobody access until they need it. So
just in time access, then, right?
So my account is a global admin, but not all the time. So if my credentials got swiped, or if a token got grabbed, or a refresh token got sniffed off of a phone or something, the fact that I am a global admin doesn't matter because I'm not a global admin except for when I need to be.
Joke's on you, people.
So what's really cool, though, is you could actually configure this down to have nobody with standing access. Nobody has standing global administrator permissions. Now, you probably want to keep a break glass account somewhere, like where, in case of emergency sort of thing.
Yes, please. Do not log yourselves out from your directory.
But you could get to a point where you have no users with standing access.
Very nice.
And there's a whole bunch of other stuff. I think Stefan's going to come on and talk to us about PIM and conditional access and a few of the other sort of IT pro management type things in a few weeks.
Yep.
But what's neat is not only do you give people the way to elevate when they need to, but you have a bunch of management around that. So if you want to prevent somebody from signing in without approval, you could force approval from a group of people, right? So that nobody has that access without at least 2 other people knowing. Or maybe you have some conditional access that says, well, that's cool if you want to go elevate as a global admin and somebody's going to approve it, but it's only going to be for 30 minutes and you have to MFA first. There's all sorts of stuff you can do. And it's for both Azure AD, so for manipulating Azure AD as an administrator, but you can also do it for Azure resources, which is super cool.
This is super cool. Yeah. You don't want people to inadvertently messing up with your resources. And I've seen a lot of developers, not with a bad intent, screwing up production resources by doing this. There are many things and many ways to lock down your production resources. We probably need to cover them at some point, as in, elevated permissions and what have you. But it is nice to know that people do not have access to production resources, and they can get access when they need to.
Yep.
Because I've also seen people just scrambling trying to find the admin that is on holiday, or the DBA that left a month ago. In order to be able to resolve some issues. So,
PIM.
We need to do something around best practices.
Yeah, PIM is super cool, and the Azure side especially, because you can do a whole lot of damage financially and otherwise with owner access to an Azure account. So you can imagine if you're read only to Azure at all times unless you need to make a change.
Correct.
At which point you either go and request access to make that change. So you may say, hey, I need to do this, and then somebody has to approve it. Or like what I'm going to do right now, because I'm the only administrator in my Azure AD directory, I don't have to approve myself, because that doesn't make any sense. But instead, I can just activate it. So we have this thing called an eligible assignment, and because I'm eligible to do it, I can just activate myself, right? And the max duration I have set to 1 hour, so that when 1 hour, it's not going to matter.
Is that something you set yourself in your Active Directory? Is that by default at 1 hour?
No, it's what you set. So you choose sort of the range of time. In fact, I'm going to set mine to half an hour because we're not going to be here that long. So
true. We want to wrap it up by 8.
I need to make a change for to add an app role, right, to my app.
Yes.
So because this is here, there's also an audit log, so I can go back and even myself and see, oh, why did I elevate at this specific time or whatever. So we click activate, and what's neat about it is we sit here for about 30-35 seconds, and it's going to activate me, it's going to refresh the page, and then we'll have our new rights. Right?
Love it. Do you get an email when that happens?
So I get an email, other global administrators in my directory get an email, which just means me, but from like 4 different accounts. So of course my phone's going to buzz itself off the desk, and then you also get reports. So there are like weekly reports that go out. There are all sorts of different ways. Not to mention the audit log that's always here in Azure AD.
Right.
There are lots of different ways to see, who's had access to what at what point. So now it says it's going to refresh in 2 seconds, and now we're going to refresh, and I should be able to go back and add an app role to my app. So now. You'll notice it says you've just activated a role. Click here to view your active roles, and we can go see what my current active roles are. So let's go back to our app registration. We'll call this old SQL app, and we're going to add an app role. And you'll notice the red bar that was over here of some actions may be disabled. Now it's not. It's not there anymore. Now we can create a new one.
Nice.
So we'll create a new one, and we'll call this stuff.do stuff, right? And this is just for users. So there's also this concept of making application roles. In fact, when you do application permissions in the portal for, say, Graph, this is how those get driven. But we'll just do a user one for now. And
but I like how I can do both.
Yep.
That's very nice.
And so for the value, this is what's going to get sent in the claim. So this is what you need to key off of in your code, right? So I'm going to call my role stuff.do, or we could call it stuffdoer, right?
Oh, come on. Put a nice emoji there.
Now that's a good question. I don't know if that's going to work, but we'll try.
Because remember, we proved... no, you can do it in the manifest, but you can't do it here. That's so unfortunate.
Anyway... So we're just going to call it stuff.do. Stuff.do is what's going to come over in the claim, and so that's what we're going to use in our app to make sure we have access to it. And then we'll just call it whatever. Doers have access to do stuff, right?
So if you want to use emojis, please don't. But if you want to use emojis, you can do it in the manifest file directly. We've done that once, but I don't know how your code will react when you have to do role comparison or role management inside your Node app or PHP app.
So now we have...
Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it.
Well, we're going to try it, just maybe not this morning. But so we have stuff.do as our value, which is what you look for in the code. And then, of course, here's our display name. And there's this nice thing, how do I go and assign app roles, right?
Yes.
And if we look at our manifest, we should see our new do stuff role, and here it is. So... we saved ourselves a copy.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah, we saved a copy and a paste, but more importantly, we saved all of the sort of tribal knowledge it would take to get here in the first place, right?
Well, that first. Second is that you have very good visibility about what kind of roles you have. And third, by copy-pasting JSON, there is a chance that you might not update the GUID, which could break your code, and you might forget. So you need to bring another GUID in or edit something. And it eliminates the possibility of human error.
Yeah,
so there's really less chances.
There's really nothing bad about doing it this way. So we've got our new app role, right? So let's go back to our enterprise app. And in our enterprise applications, we'll go find this old SQL app. And in here, this is where we can go and assign users to that role, right? Now,
yeah.
one thing to keep in mind, right, is the reason that these experiences are different right now, and why they're sort of like, oh, you go over to app registrations to define a role, and you come over to enterprise applications to set a user to that role. A lot of that is sort of, if you think of like a big enterprise or any really big company, typically the development team and the user provisioning and management teams tend to be different. That's not the case everywhere, of course, but in a lot of cases, the fact that you are building an application and working on an app, be it a line of business app or whatever, that you are doing that is somewhat distinct from the fact that people need to be assigned to them, and how do we let users sign in, and what kind of permissions do we need to put on users who are signing in. Most of that is driven by an admin. So there are these two different experiences where one is sort of IT pro focused of I have apps, and these apps have all sorts of knobs and dials for how users are exposed to them and everything else. But then we have the developer side of, well, I've registered the app and I need to define what the roles are. So for better or for worse, that's the way it is right now. The enterprise applications also include apps that maybe you haven't built. So there are apps like Dropbox and AWS Portal and all the different sort of internet apps that people use at their businesses. So your administrators get sort of a consistent experience to say, hey, well, I want to assign Johnny into role ABC for AWS, and I want to assign Carl into role ABC for our internal line of business app called Old SQL app. Well, that admin has the same experience for doing both of those. So that all happens here. So now nobody's in this role right now, our new role called stuff.do. So let's go.
It's a sad, lonely role without any users.
So let's go over to our app, right?
Oh God, what is this?
I told you, it's an old on-premises app.
No, you had to make it look old. That almost reminds me of 2005 VB.NET.
Oh, come on. It doesn't look that old. Give me a little bit of credit. Jeez, H.O. Pike. That's ridiculous.
Well, at least you have Bootstrap in there. Fine. You've modernized
What's
it.
wrong? Everybody complains about... People complain about Bootstrap. I don't think it's that bad. I mean, it works.
No, I love Bootstrap. I don't have anything against Bootstrap. There might be people who say it's bloated and it's huge and whatever, but I think these people don't work with Node, for example. Anyway.
Okay. So
no, Bootstrap is
okay. So here's our app.
blue and
Nothing crazy about our app. It just pulls some data from SQL, right? It's local DB, so it's run locally. So let's sign in. Now I'm already signed in to this browser, so I've already signed in with this user. So you see I'm signed in with, right? This is the user I was just in the portal with, right?
Yeah, I love how you display the connection string. So if you ever move to Azure or whatever, you dump everything there.
Well, yeah, that's the whole point, is to see the app get modernized, but that's a different story for a different day, right? Okay, so let's go look at my claims, right? So these are the same claims that we know and love, right? Claims you see everywhere. Now, you'll notice there's a groups claim here. And you'll notice the groups claim is also a GUID, so it's not very useful. And there are a lot of them. I mean, this is just me.
Yes.
Historically, this
on your test tenant.
Yeah,
right?
historically,
that's just your test tenant, not even.
Historically, this directory has had 20 users in it at any given time. So the fact that there are this many groups is sort of troubling on its own. But let's get down here and let's look at these two claims. Schemas.microsoft.com, blah 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 blah. Identity claims role, right? So I have system user and I have administrative user, right?
Yep.
So these are the two that drive my access to the rest of the app. And because they're here, and because they're seen as this type of claim, as a role claim, ASP.NET authorization, that the sort of baked-in ASP.NET authorization picks this up without us having to write any special code outside of our authorized tag, right?
There you go.
So let's go, and I'm going to remove these two assignments. Okay. Now, and I'm going to remove AKS RBAC admins because I'm probably still in that group anyway. So now my current user, John at jpd.ms, has no rights in this application, right? Now, in order, of course, for me to do this, I have to sign out because my application cookie has everything it needs to in here. So
Yes.
localhost 44, and this uses IS Express. Like I was really going for that old classic experience, right?
Brings back some memories.
So let's get.
Where's my Kestrel?
So I got signed in again, right? But now I can't even go look at my claims, right? And it says, so something broke. The things you need are system user, and the things you aren't, system user. So that role claim is now gone. So I have no role claim that says I'm a system user anymore, right? And that was just by virtue of a sign out, sign back in, because of course when we sign in, we go get a fresh token, and that ID token doesn't contain the role claims that we need. So let's go change our app up a little bit, and let's change this to system user, and what do we call it? Stuff.do.
I think so. You might want to double check.
Is this an array? No, it's a string. Stuff.do, right? So let me stop this and restart it. So, okay. Start this app up again. And
I like how you didn't check your role, and I don't remember. So it could be, or it could be not.
I'm 99% certain it is. So let's add myself into the stuff.do role, right?
Yeah.
So I've searched for myself. I found myself.
Oh, look at that picture over there. That's a cute one.
I
haven't seen before.
That's my wedding picture. About the only good picture I've ever had, which is why it's my face there. And I was, that was 10 years ago. Things were different back then. I've grown weary of.
You didn't know me.
Well, that's true. I've grown weary of 6 years of children, and how long have we worked together? 5 months.
just 6 months now, but it feels ages, right?
So okay, let's sign out again of the app. So I'm going to get signed out of the app, which should again be running. Take a minute to JIT. So I've added myself in here as a do stuff user, so I've got that role now. So let's get back to the app. Localhost 44303. So if my knowledge of ASP.NET authorization is correct, then the comma there should be enough to be an OR, and I should have both of those roles. So let's go to sign in. We're going to hit it. We're going to come back. And if we go to claims, we're in.
Boom.
And let's go down and look at our role claim. And here's our role claim, and it is stuff.do.
Beautiful.
Yep. So there's really nothing you have to do for this. Like, that's what's so nice about it is this is not a code thing. If you're changing or if you're updating an old app, like let's walk through that. So I've got an old app on prem, like this one. I've got now I've got a group called system user on prem, right?
Yep.
So one thing you could do to have kind of the same experience is to create a group called system user and
assign it
to the role called system user. And then you don't have to update your code at all. Or create a role called system user and create a group or a collection of groups that represent the users who need to be in that role, and then you assign the group to the role, and now you don't have to make any changes to your app.
Yes.
So it makes things so much easier. And I know it sounds kind of silly that we're obviating the need to go and copy and paste JSON, but in all honesty, that was the hardest part of doing roles before. It was just knowing where to go and what to do about them. So
yeah, it was discoverability, right? It was not the amount of effort that it takes to do the JSON. It was like, where do I find it? Why is it so hard to find the roles?
Yep.
And you have to go and look in the documentation. The docs team will be here, so hopefully they will tell us where to find it. But the whole point is that by bringing it straight into your face and by seeing app roles and user roles down there, you go like, oh, okay. Now I have a place to go and play around with these things and test them out.
Yep.
And you don't have the fear of God, because if you mess your manifest, then everything else breaks as well within your app. It's not just the roles, right?
Well, there were definitely some extra sort of hidden characters in one of the docs a while back for the manifest. So I'd go copy it and paste it, and then my manifest wouldn't save, and I wouldn't be able to figure out why until I went and pasted it in like Notepad++ and turned on hidden characters and found it. So
hidden ASCII characters that nobody knows about, or somebody's using Latin or what's the other alphabet? The
Cyrillic.
Russian characters or whatever.
Cyrillic?
Yeah, Cyrillic
Yeah.
characters that look like Latin characters, but they're not Latin characters, so everything breaks.
Or, you know,
Which, by the way,
or people
it's a big
who
security.
put emoji in their names. I mean, I guess we can try it since we're here.
I have a screenshot. We did it probably a month and a half ago.
All right.
And it worked.
All right. Well, I'm going to save this. Oh, I don't know if we can do it anymore.
Oh, wait a minute. Go to the display name. Change the display
Oh,
name.
well,
not the
display
value.
name, sure. Yeah, I mean, I could see that.
Yeah, display name. But you can do it in the display name either in the UI.
Oh, could you not? What's it? Oh, it's Windows period, right? All right. So.
Windows period.
Okay.
Maybe they changed it.
No, you can still do it. You can still do it in a display name. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this shows up.
Name.
So this will show up in the rest of the UI. So when you're,
we want to be happy.
So in fact, this is probably something we should all do. So when you're admin, if you're the developer and you're building this app, when your admin comes in, you want to and comes in to go and assign users to a role. Oh, I need to refresh this. I need to refresh this blade. So your admins are going to see whatever when you invite them to come over,
see?
right?
Make people happy.
Well, either you'll make them happy, or a new corporate policy will come out that says "Do not put emojis in your." Yeah, there we go. We can
maybe something with power, like an arm doing like a bicep curl.
Yep. So there we go.
You got the power now. Look at that.
So now I've got the do stuff roll. So
the happy stuff.
So, I mean, we're bleeding edge, right? Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for going through that with us. So anyway, go and try it today, though. This tenant that I'm in right now, this directory, there's nothing special or exclusive about it. It's just a regular garden variety Azure AD tenant. So your tenants should see this today. Should see this.
So it's available to everyone. That's the premise. It's not special bits that we get because we're Microsoft.
Yeah, so it's preview. So of course, don't take any hard dependencies on it just yet. And of course, give us feedback. So let us know. Hit the got feedback button. This actually does go somewhere. I'm happy to report. So use the feedback button if anything.
John's mailbox. Just hit it. Let's smash the submit button and make it great.
Yeah, one of our buddies, his kid is an aspiring YouTuber, and he said we saw like kind of a clip of video he's working on. He said, "Smash that subscribe button to turn it gray." And it's like, oh, that's pretty clever.
I love that.
That's pretty catchy. We're gonna have to start screaming that ourselves. Although I don't think we have a subscribe button. We don't want you to subscribe to us. We want you to follow us because subscriptions.
Please follow us. Yes. Oh no. We do have a subscribe. We're on YouTube as well. So every video that we do actually ends up on YouTube, and you can go and review it on YouTube if you want to.
Well, that's true.
That's the whole point.
But don't Twitch subscribe.
Smash the button.
Don't Twitch subscribe, because if you Twitch subscribe, then they send money, and we don't have all the plumbing in place to make sure that gets to charities and everything, and I don't want to deal with it. So please don't subscribe, but at least follow. Anyway,
please follow. We're not going to be rich from this thing. we want to make you rich with knowledge.
So this is available today. It should be in your portal today. Try it out, run it through with some of your apps, see if it works, see how it goes, and make sure that you give us feedback on any sort of problems or issues. I know one of the questions we got immediately was, can you set the ID? Can you set the GUID for it at creation time? And right now you can't. And of course, the driving reason behind that is, well, when I want to go do a role assignment to assign a user. So this experience of assigning a user, in order to do this with Graph or PowerShell, you need the role ID.
Well, you have to probably do a Graph call first to get the role metadata, and then use that information to assign the user, I suppose.
Yep. So you'll need the ID. So you can't set the ID. The ID itself is auto-generated, but make sure that you hit the feedback button and tell people if that's what you need. If you want to have the option to set your own. Of course, you've also got the option to create one here. This role has an ID that I set it to both. We'll call this ID.myID something. Of course, you could always come through here and do this experience, and then immediately go to the manifest and say, "Oh, this role has an ID that I set," and come in and change it to, go and make a change, and Oh, we have to disable it first. So yeah, so is enabled is false. Save that. Oh, I can't. Oh, what did I change that? Was that an E? I have a hard time remembering grids.
It was an E.
I'll just open it up. See, this is what happens. You go mess around the manifest while we sit not to it. Is enabled is false. Now it's false. Now we could go change the
A.
Change that to an A. Save it. Is enabled. True.
That is weird. I have to disable the role first.
Yeah. Actually, that wasn't the right one anyway. It was this one. This is the one that we need. But it's the same thing. Disable this.
Right.
Save it. We'll change this from a 6 to an A. Save it again. Re-enable it with true. So it's a couple extra steps. But at the same time, if you're doing automated role assignment through Graph, you could always, essentially to add app roles to an app through Graph, you essentially just drop this JSON in as a patch on the app anyway, on the app registration in Graph. So you should have the ID of the role there anyway. So, I absolutely understand the reason for the question. I think in practice, if you're here to create them and then running a script or something, for example, or if you're running some sort of automated script that's relying on a specific role ID, I could see that being a problem. So just let us know, and we, of course, will make sure and bubble that up too. So, okay, I think so. We're going to take a break and get our docs folks all set up. Anything before we sort of hop out for a couple minutes, Mr. Matskis?
Nope.
I remembered.
We're all good, my friend.
I remembered your last name, but thanks for assuming that I didn't. Especially seeing.
No, it's the pronunciation that gets most people. It's not the remembering or not. People go like Mats.
I have no excuses for not understanding or not knowing how to pronounce your last name at this point. So, cool. So we'll be back in 5 to 7 minutes, probably about 5 after the hour, with the docs folks. Go get a coffee and have some food.